The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for May 2nd through the 6th of 2022. Okay, let's start off with the Euro-Yen pair.
Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since strong monthly long strength was just confirmed from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate breakback in, signaling normal short strength. However, price coming right back up to the pivot high where that normal short strength was created, and thus creating strong long strength. And so in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a strong long trade that formed here, and just this week there was a weak short trade that formed right here. And so in the medium term, I'm also long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is the weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in 2020, there was a strong long trade that formed right here. And then last year at this point right here, there was compact short price action that formed, which shows strong short strength. And thus the weekly bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so as price began to head toward its main target, it ran into a strong monthly gap level that runs right through here. And so price tried to get through it but failed to get through and pulled all the way back up to these levels where there was a great opportunity for a short entry, for this weekly bias was still short with a stop loss at this pivot high right here. And then again price went toward its target and tried to break through this gap level, but again failed to break through and pulled all the way back up to here. And then again another great opportunity for a short entry form, for still the weekly bias was short with the stop loss at this pivot high right here. And then on this attempt, price actually got through that monthly gap level and looked like it was heading toward its main target down here. However, simultaneously there was a strong long trade that formed right here, which was actually stronger than this last short trade that formed right here. And so at this point, this weekly bias became long. Or in other words, price was now likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here. And then furthermore, in the next 2 weeks, there was another short trade that formed, which was again weaker than this previous long trade. So the bias remained long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit last week. And this week we have another short trade that formed right here, which in my opinion is slightly weaker than this last long trade still. And so the weekly bias is still long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Okay, so let me show you the elements in price that are providing short strength for this short trade, as well as the elements in price that are providing long strength for this long trade. So let's go back to the monthly chart. Alright, so on this monthly chart, that weekly long trade formed in this area right here. So in terms of the elements that are providing long strength, is first of all, we have this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, it has 5 touches, so it's legitimate. And then moreover, we have this horizontal trend line right here that's attached to this pivot right here. Now this also provides long strength. And moreover, we have 2 medium gap levels now. One is right here and the other is right here. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of long strength provided from these multiple elements long. And now let's go on to look what is providing short strength for the short trade that formed right here that I just showed you. Now, first of all, we have this big gap right here at this level. And you want to remember, the bigger the gap, the stronger the gap. And as you can see, it's slightly bigger than these. And now moreover, we also have a horizontal trend line from this pivot right here. Again, as you can see, there's 4 touches, so it's legitimate. Okay, so at this point, if we were just looking at that weekly bias's strength, there seems to be more long strength than short strength, and thus the weekly bias is long. However, moreover, you want to remember that the overarching strength on this monthly chart is long. For like I showed you on the overview, there was new monthly long strength just confirmed from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, signaling normal short strength. However, price came right back up to stop out that pivot high where that normal short strength was created, and thus creating strong monthly long strength. Okay, so even on this monthly chart, there is strong long strength at this point. So now let me go ahead and show you what I'll be looking for through lower confirmations. So let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, the last lower confirmation that formed was a short confirmation. Now that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. So we got a breakout and immediate break back in. However, price coming right back down to the pivot low, and thus creating strong short strength. And moreover, there's a possibility of another situation of strong short strength forming from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there was a breakout and immediate break back in, showing normal long strength. However, price can still fall all the way back down to this pivot low where that normal long strength was created. That will show that on this 4-hour chart, there's even more short strength, and thus it creates strong short strength. Okay, so at this point, if price does fall down to this pivot right here, that would actually confirm a weekly short bias. However, I will not be taking a short entry along with this lower confirmation short, for the stop loss of that weekly bias will be way up at these levels right here, which is a very bad risk and reward ratio, correct? And moreover, as you guys know, I cannot take a mid-road short entry with the stop loss of that pivot high where that short strength was created, for the overarching strength on this pair is long. And therefore, I would much rather have a lower confirmation of long strength, for that would be in line with the weekly bias's strength long, and moreover the overarching monthly strength long also. So let me show you what I'll be looking for. Let me just get rid of these. Okay, so in terms of lower confirmation, I'll be looking at this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if we could get price to fall a little bit, come right back up, break it out, and immediately break back in, signaling normal short strength. However, price will still come right back up to that pivot high where that short strength was created, and thus create strong long strength. Well, in that case, I will take a long entry with the main target at that weekly bias's pivot high right here, and the stop loss at the pivot low where the strong long strength is created. Now just keep in mind, the only reason I could take a mid-road long entry with the stop loss at this pivot and not the weekly bias's pivot is because the overarching strength on this pair is long. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated on whether or not we get lower confirmation of long strength on the midweek analysis. Okay, so let's go on to the dollar CAD. Okay, if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand how to trade price action. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there's a possibility of strong short strength forming through this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, signaling normal long strength. However, for the time being, price is ranging about in this area, which is a typical way that price comes right back down to that pivot low where that normal long strength was created, and thus creating strong short strength. For the time being, in the long term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. However, since there was a weekly short trade that formed right here and a weekly long trade that formed right here, and the weekly bias seems to be long for the current moment, in the short term I am long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So in December of 2021, there was a strong short trade that formed right here. And then as price hovered around in this area, there were never any long trades in which I could compare the strength differential between this last strong short trade. And then in February of this year, there was another strong short trade that formed. And then about a month ago, there was actually a week long trade that formed right here. And so strictly going from this weekly bias, the bias seemed to be short. However, there was confirmation of strong long strength that formed in these areas right here. And for the current moment, it actually seems like price is going toward this main target, thus stating that this weekly bias is actually long for the current moment. So first of all, let me go ahead and show you the elements that are providing short strength for this short trade and more of a long strength for this long trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so first of all, that weekly short trade formed in this area. As you can see, there's a medium-sized gap that's providing short strength. And then moreover, we have this legitimate trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. That's legitimate because it has 4 touches, 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here. And so these are the main price elements that are providing short strength for that weekly short trade. And then moreover, we have that long trade that formed right here. And the only thing that is providing long strength is this miniature gap right here. Okay, so again, strictly going from a weekly strength differential, there seems to be more short strength. However, like I mentioned earlier, there's lower time frame confirmation of long strength. So let me go ahead and show you that confirmation. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly bias formed on April 7th, roughly in these areas right here. Now, as you can see, there's a 4-hour fake double bottom that formed right here, which actually went its target height level. And right at this point right here, this 4-hour strong long strength was confirmed, and thus confirming a long weekly bias. And so on this pullback all the way down to these levels was a great opportunity for a long entry, with the stop loss at that weekly bias's pivot low, which is here, and the main target roughly in these areas right here. And so at this point, what I'm looking for is actually a lower confirmation of strong short strength that can override the strong long strength that was confirmed right here. So I'm looking at these trend lines from this pivot to this pivot right here, and another one from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, before price hits that weekly bias's main target at this pivot high right here, if price could pull all the way back down, break out either one of these, and break right back in, creating normal long strength. However, price could come right back down to that pivot low where that normal long strength was created. That will create strong short strength and thus override that previous strong long strength formed right here and set up a nice short entry with a stop loss at that weekly bias's stop loss level roughly in these areas and its main target down here. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated on this setup also on the midweek analysis. Okay, so let's go on to the euro dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here is very strong short, and this move still having a ways to go, in the long term I am short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, since there was a fake weekly HNS that formed right here, that actually went its target height level, thus providing strong weekly short strength also. In the medium term, I'm also short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is the weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So at this point right here, there was a long trade that formed. And at this point right here, there was a short trade that formed. and this short trade was stronger than this long trade. And so the weekly bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And then moreover, as price pulled back right here, there were still no signs on the lower time frames of long strength. And so price continued down here. And again, there were no signs of long strength. So it kept going down. And again, there were no signs of long strength. However, at this point, there was actually a new weekly short trade that formed. However, this weekly short trade hit a monthly gap level that ran right through these levels, which became a target for this weekly short trade. Thus, at this point, the bias actually became long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low, and that main target was hit right here. And at this point, although the bias became long for an instant, there were still no signs of lower time frame long strength, and so price continued down to these levels and actually reached a monthly strong trend line level right here, which caused the initial bounce at these levels. But again, there were no signs of lower time frame long strength. And moreover, there was actually a new weekly short trade that formed right here. And so at this point, I'm waiting for a new weekly long trade to form so I can measure the strength differential between this hypothetical long trade and the last weekly short trade right here, so I could come out with a weekly bias, whether long or short. Now, moreover, there was a daily bias that formed again this week with a short trade in this area and a new long trade that just formed yesterday. So let me go ahead and explain that to you. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, the last short trade that formed was right here, and a long trade formed yesterday at this point right here. Now let me show you the price elements that are providing short strength for this short trade, and moreover the long strength for this long trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that daily long trade formed right here, and there's long strength provided from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there's 4 touches, so it's legitimate. And moreover, there's a gap level right here that's providing long strength. So let me zoom back in. Okay, so there's a big gap right here that is providing long strength for that daily long trade. Now, in terms of the short trade that formed roughly in these areas right here, there's actually no major elements that are providing short strength to it. So again, that daily bias, going strictly from a daily bias perspective, there's more long strength than short strength. However, recall that this pair has a lot of weekly short strength in it from a fake weekly HNS that formed right here and just hit its target height level roughly in these areas. And so for the time being, I much rather take a short entry along with that daily bias. So let me show you how I'm planning to trade that daily setup. So let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, that daily bias's risk parameters is at this pivot high right here, and the other end is at this pivot low right here. Now again, if you go strictly from the daily chart, the bias seems to be long at this point. So what I'll be looking for in terms of long entries is lower confirmation from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now price could come down a bit and come right back up, break it out, and immediately break back in, creating normal short strength, however price coming right back up to stop it out, and thus creating strong 1 hour long strength. Now this will be lower confirmation of long strength. However, like I mentioned earlier, since the weekly bias has strong short strength in it, the only reason I would take a long entry at this point for the daily bias is, first of all, if I get strong long strength confirmation, and then moreover get a nice pullback to minimize the risk. So the stop loss will be at this pivot low right here. Okay, and in terms of short lower confirmation, I'll be looking at this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if we could get a breakout, an immediate break back in, signaling normal long strength, but price still coming down to stop it out at that pivot low where that long strength was created, that will create strong short strength. Now in this case, since there is weekly strong short strength, I'm willing to take mid-road entries with the stop loss at the pivot high where that strong short strength was created, and not at the daily bias's stop loss level right here, while the main target remains the same at that daily bias's main target right here. Okay, and I'll let you guys know which setup takes place on the midweek analysis.
Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. Just a heads up, from now on I'll be discussing other Forex pairs when there's nothing much going on the main pairs discussed on this channel. And just remember, if you don't understand the strategy that I use in these forecasts, it's all explained in the price action trading course, so please check it out. But if you still don't understand the strategy after you watch the course, don't hesitate to ask me questions in the comments section and I'll gladly explain it to you. Okay, so I hope you guys have a great week and thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.